Just hit the go live button. I think we're live, folks. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me for this lunchtime live stream. I am working from home. I am sitting at home, right in front of my workstation, in fact. Gonna eat myself a delicious lunch of today, mini caramel apple cupcakes, which they look absolutely delicious, I should say. And while eating this lunch, I'm going to take a little bit of break from the usual grind to just discuss some random topic, as per usual. For folks who are new, I'm just going to hang out and talk about a random topic. Today, it's going to be exercise and some of my experience with like over-exercise and some of the dangers of it, because I think it's something that a lot of people just assume that, you know, a little bit of a good thing is good, so more of it must be better. But in actuality, exercising too much can have some really, really negative ramifications to it. And I think it's something that's like really important for people who are concerned about starting, you know, a journey of improving their fitness or something like that. Like, it's something to be really cognizant of. It's pretty rare to run into folks who actually exercise too much, but, you know, I'll get into a little bit later the kind of mindset that's required for like running into this problem of over-exercise and excessive exercise, stuff like that. But before anything else, I want to try one of these caramel apple cupcakes because they look friggin' amazing. And these are supposedly filled with something, so I'm gonna take a bite out of one of these. Oh my gosh, nice caramel flavor. Some like swipe of like an appley jelly or something on top. That is really delicious. I don't know if I'd call that filled, but and again, these are pretty small cupcakes, so. I don't know how much you can fill a cupcake. That's like the size of a thimble. All right, guys. I hope you're sitting down. I hope you have something tasty to eat. Maybe you're snacking on something. Maybe you just want to hear me chat about some random topic. And maybe you want to ask me a question. That's cool, too. If you do want to ask me any questions, just go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'm always happy to field just about any questions people ask nowadays. So anyway, getting right into it, after I eat a second cupcake, I should say. So I know that a lot of people, especially like right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's bringing to light the fact that there's a lot of dangers of having like really poor metabolic health or just not being very healthy or fit in general. And it is exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic because, you know, particularly having insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes or any kind of metabolic disorder, as far as I'm aware, actually increases your risk of mortality with COVID-19. So it's very important to like consider the fact that, you know, improving your health is something that, you know, can help you in the long term, but not only that, in a situation like this, it can also help you quite acutely. You know, it can have quite acute ramifications if you don't have the best health. So I think that like exercise and being fit and being healthy is something that's at the front of a lot of people's minds today in this day and age. So like when people do start exercising, a lot of folks who are a little bit like just kind of going by the seat of their pants and taking any advice that they get, like, you know, getting advice from internet columns, getting advice from fitness magazines, that kind of thing. Maybe they're doing it on their own. Maybe they've hired a fitness trainer who's not quite as well versed with somebody who's like just off the couch. You know, a lot of times people get this idea that, yeah, if you do exercise a little bit off the couch, of course, that's going to improve your health quite a bit. But as you like increase the volume of exercise that you're engaging in, eventually, you know, you run into these diminishing returns. And there is this kind of like U-curve, U-shaped curve to the benefit of exercise, where if you do overdo it, then there's actually some really, really incredibly bad health ramifications to it. So it is something. Now, I will say that over-exercise is exceedingly rare. So if you think that you might be over-exercising, you are not over-exercising. You know, if it is something that anybody like actually thinks about, there's a very, very small, very slim possibility that you're over-exercising. The kinds of stuff that I'm going to be talking about today is like excessive endurance exercise. So think like a professional Ironman triathlete or a professional Tour de France cyclist or something like that. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. But I pulled up a couple of interesting articles and web pages and studies and stuff like that on overexercise. So I thought I'd check it out. And I will say the primary like reason that overexercise is bad is because of stress and because it creates excessive cortisol, which in small doses, like I've mentioned in the past, cortisol in small doses is a good thing. But chronic cortisol and chronic stress, you know, it has a lot of negative effects. I'm sure everybody's perfectly, like, really aware of that. Like, I'm sure that's news to nobody. But one thing that a lot of folks don't really realize is that the amino acid sequence that's required for your body to synthesize cortisol is I can't remember if it's the same or if it's very similar to the amino acid sequence that's required to synthesize testosterone. So in actual fact, like, your body has to make a choice of, you know, if you're pushing it, if you're like, pardon me, like if you're in a constant stressed out state, then your body's, you know, it's creating cortisol, in fact, instead of testosterone. So it's like your body gets one or the other. It can't have both. Quite, you know, perhaps it can, but no, I shouldn't even say that. If your body is creating too much cortisol, it is doing that at the expense of creating testosterone. So it's a lot of this is has to do with like sexual health and things along those lines. I think sexual health and testosterone levels is the primary thing that people like, it's the primary thing that people associate with testosterone, but there are a lot of other ramifications of having low testosterone. So yeah, I think this great picture of this totally jacked dude doing some squats is a great motivation for a lot of people to go out there and exercise. And like, it's a big jacked guy, you know, who doesn't want to be, you know, who doesn't want to have awesome muscles like this dude. So I came across this article. I think it does a decent job of talking about overtraining. This is overtraining in general, not specifically with endurance exercise, which is the stuff that I've had some experience with. But still, I think it's a decent article. This is on muscleandstrength.com/articles/how too much exercise ruins your testosterone levels. So the first bit of this is just a little bit of an overview. This is no pain, no gain. People see this often enough that actually end up overtraining themselves to their own demise. Pardon me. You should always remember that recovery and rest are also part of the equation. Exercise is a must for a healthy lifestyle, but more is not necessarily better and instead can lead to diminishing returns. Yada yada yada, going on. So though a singular symptom is unlikely to indicate anything specific, if you notice any of the following occurring in clusters, it is a safe bet that you're in overtraining territory. So this is like a couple of things that they're talking about: changes in heart rate, getting sick frequently, mood swings and irritability, decreased libido and sex drive, infertility, feeling fatigued or constantly stressed, weight loss and suppressed appetite, poor performance despite frequent training sessions, prolonged DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, and poor recuperative ability, sleeping disorders, interrupted sleep or insomnia. Yeah, let's see. A couple of these are really interesting to talk about, actually. So we've got weight loss. For example, weight loss and suppressed appetite is kind of interesting. You will see, like, typically you'll see some weight loss, but it is also associated with fat gain. So you'll actually get this kind of like skinny fat look if you are overtraining too much. So in this case, you're basically like wasting away your muscle, kind of. Let's see. Poor performance. So yeah, that's just like poor performance and prolonged DOMs. I think that's basically like you're just not giving yourself enough time to recover, that kind of thing. Now, one interesting one is the sleeping disorder with interrupted sleep or insomnia. And now, one of the symptoms of overtraining and adrenal fatigue, which I know is kind of an overused term, but if you do have like actual adrenal fatigue, not so much that your adrenal glands aren't creating the hormones that they should, but that your adrenal receptors are kind of burned out and they're not like reacting to adrenaline and epinephrine in the way that they should. So with the sleeping disorder, now this is kind of something, like I said, it's kind of interesting. So what happens with overtraining and hypercortisolism, or is that it causes hypercortisolism. So you have a lot of like cortisol floating around in your body, in your system constantly. And when you do sleep, you go in these waves of sleep. It's not just like you go to bed and you're asleep for a set amount of time. You go into some periods of really deep sleep, some periods of lighter sleep, and each one of these sleep cycles is about 90 minutes. And at the end of each sleep cycle, you're actually in a state of like really light sleep. So that's the state where if you wake up at that point in a sleep cycle, then you're probably going to get up and feel refreshed and feel great and feel fine. By contrast, like if you try to force yourself to wake up by an alarm when you're in like the deepest part of sleep, it's going to be really, really tough to get up and you'll feel really, really bad. So anyway, with the cortisol floating around in your system, if every time you enter one of these like really light portions of a sleep cycle, then you're going to wake up. Like your body's going to be like extra alert, just a little bit more alert. So if you find yourself sleeping for 90 minutes at a time and just waking up every 90 minutes like clockwork in the middle of the night, then it's a good indication that you might have hypercortisolism or adrenal fatigue. Again, I've said this before, I got to put an asterisk on there. Like, I'm not a doctor. I can't properly diagnose these things, but if you have that symptom, like that's kind of a rare symptom, and it's a very strange symptom to be able to sleep only 90 minutes at a time. But it's one that, like, if you have that symptom, then it's probably a good idea to go see an endocrinologist or a doctor to get yourself checked out, get your hormone levels tested, do a I think it's called a cortisol a cortisol challenge panel, I believe is what it's called, where you measure your cortisol at various points in the day. So anyway, moving on, we have this article says the testosterone threat. If those don't get you worried, then this might. Ever heard of people saying testosterone being a bit out of whack? You may be surprised to know that there's a correlation between training and testosterone. Let's see, we go on. In men, testosterone peaks at puberty and begins to decrease 1 to 2% annually starting around age 30. And an average adult male has a T level of some numbers in his 30, though T levels usually drop with age, but factors such as stress further reduce testosterone. Yes, even the kind of stress that you get from exercise. Like, that's super important. Like, your body doesn't really do a good job of differentiating different kinds of stressors. In this case, stress from exercise, stress from staying up too late, stress from work, stress from home life, stuff like that. Like, it's all the same. It's all going to cause this kind of adrenal fatigue and burnout. So this basically goes on to say, like, I don't think there's a whole lot else in this article that's super interesting. But yeah, this is kind of like a decent primer. It's kind of like a bro science article, but I think it did a good job of basically laying out the groundwork for this idea. Oh, Frederic, thank you for joining the chat. Says super interesting, man. Thanks. Of course, good to see you, dude. Says those guys in the article all look like they don't need natural testosterone. Lol. Yeah, maybe not. I am dubious of the idea that somebody can get quite as jacked as some of these guys just on their own endogenous testosterone. Oh. Then again, not impossible. Like, you can be a natural bodybuilder and become really big and jacked like that. But you do have to, like, dedicate your life to it. So one example of overtraining and, like, testosterone levels going really bad. Well, I do have to put a caveat here. Like, for a professional athlete, they're putting aside their health basically to make sure that they're performing as best as they can at whatever sport they're performing at. So one great example of this is Ryan Hall, who I believe he still holds the American half marathon record of like 58 minutes or something like that. For a while, he was like, people thought that he was going to be the next like best professional marathon runner in the world. Like he was really top notch. So I pulled up a couple of articles about Ryan Hall. This is Ryan Hall. Back in 2014, back when he was an incredible runner. Like I said, he was putting aside his health basically to make sure that he was as good of an athlete as possible. And I believe in the 2016 Olympics, like he dropped out of the Olympic marathon halfway through because he just wasn't feeling well enough. And for like years, this guy could not complete a marathon. And it was basically like he would try to compete, and he would get halfway through and he'd have to drop out because of excessive fatigue. And he just couldn't get that same level of like fitness and that same level of speed that he was able to earlier in his career. Now, after a couple of years after this picture was taken, Ryan Hall retired. He officially retired from professional running, and he wanted to get his health back in order. He wanted to, spend more time with his family. Now, his wife I believe his wife is still a pretty well accomplished professional runner in her own right. And fast forward a couple of years to 2018, that picture is the same guy. Like, this is Ryan Hall after taking a couple of years off from excessive marathon training. And now Ryan Hall is the kind of guy who I don't think this individual was doping, because number one, if he was doping, he wouldn't have had to drop out of so many races late in his career. But this is a great example of how like somebody who put aside their health. And he did mention that testosterone was like one of the number one things, that he had low testosterone and that was really affecting his lifestyle and his health. And he directly blamed his excessive training load of trying to be a professional marathon runner. So this is a great example of how this guy took a couple of years off, gained, 20 or 30 pounds of muscle. I mean, he's freaking jacked. And he's still an incredible runner. Like, he's not nearly as fast as he used to be. He used to be able to run marathons at like a 4:30 pace or something like that. And nowadays, I think he runs ultras more at like a 5:30 to 6-minute pace. So he's still like an incredible runner, just not quite the runner that he used to be. Let's see. What else did we have coming up? I think this was another article just talking about how Ironman triathlon can cause a lot of problems. Oh, I think this one was really interesting, mainly because of the this guy. He's an Ironman triathlete. He says when low testosterone and training clash. This article is mainly interesting for its intro. It says when low testosterone and training clash, the effects can be devastating. I may look healthy, but I'm not. I'm a triathlete suffering from fatigue, low libido, and osteoporosis. I have the bones of a 73-year-old, and I'm 29. Like, bone health is one of those things that you don't typically associate testosterone with, but if you do have low testosterone, then having like bone wasting is basically one of the things that can happen. And this actually happened to me back in 2013 when I was training really heavy for Ironman triathlon. I went and got some kind of scan. I believe it was a DEXA scan on just my arm. I didn't do a full body scan for like body composition or anything like that. But it was some kind of scan to check the bone density and the mineral density in my bones. And I had the bones of like a 70-year-old. And let's see, 2013, I would have been 26, I believe. That sounds about right. 26. That would have been the year that I turned 26. So yeah, as somebody in their mid-20s with the bone health of, a senior citizen, like it's really impactful. I was very frail. I was getting injured all the time. Like, it was really, really terrible. I didn't know at the time just how badly I was trashing my health because of my like hard-headed pursuit of trying to do really well at Ironman triathlon. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why, I shouldn't say that is like the reason why I don't do Ironman triathlon anymore, is because the excessive training load was like, it's unhealthy. It's really unhealthy. And I'm glad that I did it. You know, it's kind of cool to be able to hold up those medals and to say like, look, I did an Ironman triathlon. That is an incredible achievement. I feel really proud of that. But it's also really unhealthy, you know, to do that kind of stuff. I don't have a reason to. I don't get a sense of accomplishment out of performing those giant endurance feats anymore. So, like, I don't do it, basically, is it. Every now and then somebody tries to, like, convince me, like, oh, man, you should get back into it. You could do really well. And I'm like, no, I really don't want to. It's really crappy. Now, most of this that I've talked about has been based around testosterone and male health. But this certainly does also affect female health quite a bit. Now, with female health, it's more about energy availability, which is like calories in, calories out, compared to the like excessive cortisol. That's my understanding of it. Like, that's my, you know, kind of boneheaded understanding of it, I should say. I don't understand the female triad quite as much as I understand the low testosterone effects of excessive training. But there is, it's unfortunate that there's not as much information out there, like sport-specific information out there specifically for females as there is for males in the sport. But you can find it if you do look hard enough. So this article talks about the female athlete triad, which is a syndrome involving the interplay between low energy availability, menstrual dysfunction, and altered bone mineral density. Elite and recreational endurance runners are at a significant increased risk of fat. I think they gave it that acronym basically so that women would see that and say like, oh, that's obviously bad. Okay, so they say that increased risk of fat due to the high energy demands in combination with the potential desire for leanness and improved performance. And it is ironic that like one of the best things that you can do to improve your health if you do run into this as a woman is to basically like stop training and eat more food. So you do have to like get a little bit fat to reverse these effects. Yeah. Let me put that out there. Being slightly plus size, definitely not a bad thing. Having some curves, having a little bit of excess adipose tissue, definitely not a bad thing, as long as it's not too much. It can be unhealthy if it's too much. Anyway, let us continue with this interesting article. This isn't a super long article, so I might just read through the entire thing. More recently, the acronym RED-S, Relative Energy Deficiency Syndrome, has been used due to the complexity of the condition and that male endurance runners can also experience similar symptoms. Pardon me. The basic principle of FAT and RED-S is that energy intake is lower and that energy expenditure required for general activities of daily living, growth, and sports activities. With this in mind, we can see that endurance athletes are at higher risk for the condition due to the significant energy expenditure required for endurance training and events. If the high energy demands required for training and endurance events are consistently not met, then the physiological processes are compromised with the suppression of many systems, including metabolic rate, menstrual function, new bone formation, protein synthesis, and immune responses and cardiovascular health. The dysfunction of these systems can result in amenorrhea, the absence of the menstrual period, and subsequent infertility, osteoporosis, osteopenia, and osteoporosis, stress fractures, and inability to repair exercise-induced tissue and muscle damage, and the inability to recover from illness. That sounds like a great reason not to let yourself get into a metabolic or like a caloric hole too much. Now, I have mentioned in the past, like, one of the benefits of having cheat days is that you actually avoid this, too much of this, because this mainly occurs when you are in a consistent caloric deficit over a long period of time. But if you do have a cheat day where you just once a week make sure that you're eating like 500 or 1,000 calories more than you actually need on that day, then your body doesn't fall into this consistent hole of well, then you'll avoid some of the symptoms of caloric deficit. Yeah, I'm not actually going to read through most of the rest of this. So these are some of the symptoms that this article talks about with the female athlete triad and red S. It says amenorrhea, the absence or abnormal menstrual cycle, recent stress fractures, increased constipation, disordered or restricted eating, weight loss, excessive or chronic fatigue, and increased frequency of illness. Now, I do want to give a pump to one podcast that I've listened to for a long time. This is Endurance Planet, or this is an episode from a couple of years ago that these guys put out, talking about basically the same thing, and like going into like the science of what causes it, how to prevent it, how to recognize it, things like that. Now, I started listening to this podcast several years ago, basically because it was about long distance triathlon and endurance racing, and it has really evolved over time. The host of this podcast, if you go back in time, it's Tani Prazak. She is now Tani Gibson. And yeah, it evolved over time because it's hosted by this female endurance triathlete. It eventually became like this show that was, well, there became a bigger focus on specifically like female athlete health. And like, I basically just continued listening to it out of habit, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in Endurance Planet. So you can go back in time or just listen to some of the more recent episodes, or just pick this one up. This one is about Stacy Sims, PhD, the Everything Guide for Female Athletes, how to navigate your menstrual cycle, the menopause years, cortisol stress, nutrition needs, and more. And just looking at some of the notes of this, so let's see. One of the things that they talk about was amenorrhea, missing periods, and stress, and female athlete triad versus red S. Not just the three factors. What is red S? Missing periods. If BF is reasonable, up to 30%. I don't know what BF is. I'd have to look that one up. And what are the root causes? Inadequate nutrition, energy availability, and or hypocaloric diets that don't meet the needs of an athlete. High stress and high cortisol. Stress may be for many things, not just exercise. Like, this podcast is really chock full of really, really interesting information, I think, even though like a lot of the episodes don't really relate to me since they're about things like amenorrhea. Then it's something that, I just find it interesting anyway. Anyway, I think that over-exercise and getting yourself into a state like this is something that's very difficult to do. It's something that like requires hard-headed stubbornness that is really rare in people. Basically, like people don't like to exercise in general. So if you do get to a state where you're over-exercising, it is very, very rare, but it is something that can happen. I've been ignoring a couple of comments, so let's see what else has been going on. Frederick asks a question, says, since the body isn't good at differentiating between stressors, would an individual with a lot of personal stress, etc., work, family, etc., need more recovery days from exercise? Yeah, that is absolutely true. That is certainly true. I think the number one thing when it comes to exercise recovery is making sure that you're getting enough sleep. I should say the number one thing that's overlooked. The number one thing is probably nutrition. But the most important thing that a lot of people do overlook is getting adequate amounts of sleep. And yeah, it's like if your body is in a stressed out state, like basically your body is either recovering from exercise or it's in a stressed out state. So if you're in a continually stressed out state, then your body is not able to recover. It's not able to get those like recovery cycles that it would need. That's why there's this term called your fight or flight mechanism, which is also known as your sympathetic nervous system, I believe. And that's basically like talking. It's this very simplified way to describe your body when it's in a stressed out state. Now, the flip side of that coin is called your rest and digest system, or your parasympathetic system, which is like anytime you're really chilled out and able to recover and rest and things like that from exercise. So it's like, yeah, so it's like your body is doing one or the other. Like it can't do both at the same time, basically. So it is something that you do need to look out for. So if like, yeah, if you are somebody who has 4 kids and you're working a full-time job, then maybe taking on an Ironman triathlon, not a good time in your life to do that, you know? So it's something that you do have to weigh out. Let's see. You say, interesting info about the refeed day. I'm sure you're familiar with the Matador study about diet breaks. I didn't know you could potentially only do it once a week and see positive results. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's anything magical about a week. I think it was just the study that I was reading happened to use a 1-week cycle. So it could be that if you refeed once every 10 days, you'd probably get the same results. Or maybe if you refeed once every 4 days, maybe you'll get even better results. I don't know. I mean, it's something that you gotta look at. But it is interesting that you can avoid a lot of the long-term negative effects of a hypocaloric diet from one refeed day a week. And of course, the world lives on weeks. Everybody knows what a week is, so it's just kind of convenient to do that. Say like, Saturday is my refeed day, or it's my cheat day, or whatever. Fabian, thank you for joining the stream. Asks, hey Steve, what days do you exercise on? Every day that ends with Y. I exercise every day, 7 days a week, man. I will say that I exercise, quote unquote, exercise 7 days a week, but like the days that I'm really doing hardcore training, I probably only do super hard training like once every 3 or 4 days, basically so that I give my body time to adapt to those really hard training days. And then the days between those super hard training days is more like active recovery, where I might do some like really light spinning, or just some like spinning on my bike, I should say, on that guy back there. Yeah, so some like really light, easy spinning on my bike, or some like stretching and mobility exercise, that kind of thing. And Frederic, one last comment, says, random but digging your new quarantine hairstyle, lol. Yeah, I've got the quarantine hair going on. I had to do something with it. I've got so much hair. I've got so much damn hair right now. I had to do something with it, so that's what I'm doing. All right, guys, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that lunchtime live stream. Maybe you just wanted to hang out and take a look at my beautiful face. Maybe you had something to snack on. Maybe you found it interesting. Maybe you found it fun. Whatever it was, thank you guys for joining me today. I'm going to have one last cupcake, and I will see you guys on Friday. So peace out. You guys have a good one.